Hi Pisces, I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that everything is good in your world. For those that want to continue working on your shadow selves and integrating it, let us do that. And as such, I've pulled the cards, and it really speaks to the situation, I think, as of late for a lot of us. And if you aren't a Pisces, you can still enjoy the messages. You don't have to be a Pisces for these messages, but that's who I collectively read for and the energies that I draw upon, because I am a Pisces as well. So it helps me to get the messages across. So, like I tell everybody, when it comes to shadow work can be painful because we're uprooting old belief systems that no longer serve us, and it also shows us some lies that we've told ourselves, and it's about taking responsibility for our well-being. So it can hurt, to go through this. So I'm sending you so much love, and just know that I'm doing the work alongside you all, and we do it so that we can become whole, and then we become the best versions of ourselves. So let's get into it. The tarot cards that I pulled are the Tower and the World in reverse. There's a goal that you have not been able to achieve. There is something here that is holding you back, and now you're at the point where you can no longer ignore it. Hence, the Tower is here. It's time to change some old systems, some old belief patterns. The shadow aspect that we're dealing with today is this me? How many of you look in the mirror and you miss who you used to be? You miss all of the dreams that you once had. How many of you, for example, wanted to be pro ball players or pro football players or famous Olympians? Or if it wasn't sports, how many of you wanted to go into a career path that would really speak from your soul and you would be inspired to do it every day? This card is this me, speaks to growing up and abandoning ourselves. When we are younger, we go through situations that become our reality, and we adopt belief systems so that we can survive. So perhaps you had a dream and somebody said, yeah, but you have to be realistic. There's how many other people out there are trying to be this exact same thing? There's no way that what makes you think you could do this better than anyone else? You got to be realistic. You can't do this, that, or the other. Or perhaps some of you thought you'd be a famous musician and you spent all of this time and effort and money into trying to be something that it just wasn't for you because it just didn't work out. I guess the question is, what belief system kept you trying when it continued to fail? And how long were you going to go with it? And then what did you do when you realized that wasn't your path? Did you fall apart? And now you're stuck in that pain? Is there somewhere subconsciously where you're not living up to the standards that you want for yourself? Something needs to end. But what I feel is, in this reading, it's to do with external forces. Somebody convinced you had to do something, and you took that on. You took that on because either one, deep down you knew that the dream you had wasn't really going to work out. It's like you knew deep down, but yet your ego wanted to keep pushing you. It's like you wanted to prove yourself wrong. So in essence, it's about instincts, right? Also. And instinctually, a lot of us looked to the external world to define us. We followed in the footsteps of those who tried to tell us what we would be good at, or what we would thrive in, or what would make us happy. The reason why we did that is because when you're growing up and you're a child, you're like a sponge and you're trying to survive. So you do things to make people happy, such as your parents, your teachers, society, any institutions, even in your religion. Maybe you did things to appease them because of a need for acceptance. But interestingly, what I see is that acceptance had to start with you, but you never were taught that. And the reason why is because of the control that the world falls into. People in the world fall into these control patterns where they gave up on themselves, so they try to control others. It's very interesting. Very interesting. So in their need to control others, they get a sense of belonging. They get a sense of, I have a purpose. But the reality is deep down underneath, when they look in the mirror, they still feel empty. And the reason why is because the attention should be on themselves and what it is that they wanted to do. This is about the external world and how we allow it to dictate our decisions, our course of action. Look at the military, for example. People are fighting for a reason, right? But at the end of the day, is it your dream? Or did you do it just because you thought that was all you're worth? So this card is asking you to look inside. Look inside yourself and see what it is that you truly wanted to do. And what is stopping you from doing it? There are always ways, if you have the will, to become and do whatever it is. But you have to shed the belief system that A, you can't do it, B, that you're not good enough, C, that it won't make others happy, and D, that it's impossible. Because really, what that is just your scared inner child saying, I had to rely on people. I had to rely on people for most of my upbringing, and because I did, I had to do as they told me to do. And in a sense, you were provided with what you need, or your wants or wishes were made possible if you conform to what people wanted from you. But this is the time when we have to leave that child behind. The inner child now needs to grow up. And to do that, it has to be willing to take responsibility. Should you feel bad or guilty or ashamed of yourself? Absolutely not. You were growing. You did what you had to do to survive. But somewhere in the journey of life, there came a point where it was time to grow up and take responsibility for our own wants, needs, and desires. But that was scary. And then it's funny because we go and branch out into the world now, and we still expect the world to meet our needs. We expect people to help us, take care of us in some way, shape, or form. Not everybody. This is just for those who it's resonating for. We look to the outer world to protect us in some way, shape, or form. We look to the outer world to provide for us in some way, shape, or form. But what's interesting about this is that perpetuates the paradox, is that it perpetuates our shame cycle, and not only our shame cycle, but it also continues to perpetuate the belief that we're not good enough, that we can't do it. And why? Because we're still giving our power up to the external world. It's time we take responsibility for ourselves. And how do we do that? How do we take responsibility for our happiness? We look at this tower and we realize that everything that we think supported us, it did at a time, but it can't forever. We have to take responsibility for our happiness and what our lives will become. So there needs to be some self-forgiveness for continuing to just go with the flow or do what's expected. There has to be some forgiveness, because maybe even some of you never even got away from the influences of the external world. But one day you're going to find yourself in this tower moment where nobody externally is going to show up for you. And it's a sad reality, because you're used to some comforts, or you're used to just doing whatever to keep up appearances. But with that comes an emptiness and a pain. And then one day you're going to wake up and you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to say, is this me? What do I do now? And you're going to ask that question because you're going to be feeling empty, or something will be taken away from you that you depended on, that you can no longer depend on. So give yourself compassion for trying to survive growing up. But also give yourself the realization that now the reason why things may be taken away from you in life is because now it's time for you to see what you're worth. That means taking extra courses if you need to get a job that you want. That means relying on yourself. See what you're made of. Not everything is impossible. You got to go within and see what it is that you want to make possible. Then you got to believe that you can do it. Because the only reason why you tell yourself deep down subconsciously that you can't is because for the first how many years you had to rely on others. But now Spirit is trying to show you, okay, this is where you have to do it on your own. So I pulled a healing card. And interestingly, it was entrapment. So I like how this all comes together in the fact that some of you feel entrapped. And why? Because you're still going along, still going with the flow, because it feels safer in a sense. It feels safer because it's all you know. So you go along with what the external world is saying or putting upon you because, yeah. And then that also keeps us in a victim consciousness, because then we can easily say, hey, the world is taking everything away from me. And yes, actually it is. But there's a reason for that. It's because it's time for you to see what you're made of. So to heal this entrapment, this card, its key phrase is you're letting too many things in your environment control your life. You've drawn it. This card came up because it's time for a shift in personal power. You're encouraged to take responsibility for your life and choose new ways of thinking that create change. So if you're feeling trapped in something, that's because you are, but you're keeping yourself there. But I bet you didn't even realize why you were keeping yourself there. The reality is that for you to make the changes that you want, need, and desire, you need a system, a daily discipline, and motivation. As long as you blame outside influences, like these negative worldly circumstances in your life, then you're powerless. It's the government, your abusive background, the interest rates, it's the bank's fault. The system that many ultra successful people use is they read books every day, they listen to audios, they go to as many seminars as they can, they practice recognizing others' achievements and form relationships with like-minded people. That is how you start to motivate yourself to change, because you'll see their self-belief And that self-belief will have an effect on you. But it starts with you just taking that first step. So the action here is ask yourself, are the people in my life building me up and inspiring me? If not, it's time to take charge and to start making change in your environment. The first step could be cutting out all negative media from your daily life. That could be the news, for example. If you watch the news every day and you're getting depressed, well, guess what? I don't blame you. It's because they're painting the negative or this negative picture of what life is about, and that keeps us stuck. And why? Because it's a benefit to them too. They don't want people being incredible, because the more people that are incredible are no longer slaving to the system that they've implemented. Are the people inspiring you? If not, it's definitely time to make that change. And the first step could be, as we said, cutting out all negative media from your daily life. And another important action could involve changing your diet, like cutting out sugar or food with MSG and GMO, and replacing them with fresh organic vegetables. That will give you the energy, because maybe you're feeling like you're lacking energy. Take a moment and say the following statement to yourself or out loud. I am in control of my life. Nothing can affect me unless I choose to let it. My thoughts create my reality. Keep repeating this statement until you feel stronger. Eventually, you will believe it. It'll help you make the new choices. And remember, your words and self-talk are very powerful in altering your physiology. So if this means that every day you've got to repeat affirmations to yourself, then that's what you got to do. If this means that every day you're investing that time into yourself, then guess what? Whatever you invest, you'll start to see out in the world, because you're doing it for you. Okay? So I don't know if this helps at all, but for some, I feel that the protection of hiding behind, or accepting for that matter, other people's expectations of us and then living up to those expectations, that is what has destroyed you inside. And that's why Spirit has come along now and says, you know what, you're no longer going to be entrapped in this dynamic, because there's a whole world of opportunity waiting for you. And the only way that change happens is if it's forced sometimes, because if we can't make the changes ourselves, Spirit will come in and do it for us. And it does it by removing everything that we know and that we've been used to. Isn't that weird? But it's how Spirit gets us back on track. So if this resonated for any of you, I would love to know. And most importantly as well is abandonment, okay? So abandonment is about how we abandon ourselves, and there's reasons why. Examples of self-abandonment would be not trusting your instincts, second-guessing yourself, overthinking and ruminating, letting others make decisions for you and assuming that they know more than you do. Or there's people-pleasing, seeking validation from others, suppressing your needs and interests in order to please others. Hiding parts of yourself, which is giving up your interests and goals and not sharing your feelings. Perfectionism, having unrealistically high expectations for yourself and never feeling worthy regardless of how much you do and what you accomplish. Self-criticism and judgment, and actually that perfectionism piece. You ever wonder why you don't feel fulfilled? Ask yourself, who are you doing all of this perfection for? Is it for you or others? No wonder you're always never feeling worthy, because it's not really what you want. Self-criticism and judgment, if you say hurtful and mean things to yourself when you don't meet your own painfully high standards, not honoring your needs, not recognizing that your needs are valid, or failing to practice self-care. Just as this healing card said, you know, do these things to take care of yourself. Nobody's going to take care of you anymore. You have to do it yourself. Suppressing your feelings. And maybe even some of you developed a belief that you were unworthy of self-care. We abandon ourselves when we don't value ourselves, when we don't act in our own best interest, and when we don't encourage and comfort ourselves. So suppressing the feelings by pushing them away through denial or mood-altering substances and avoidance, or not acting according to your values, doing things to please others even if they go against your beliefs and values, codependent relationships, focusing on someone else's needs, wants, and problems and neglecting yourself, not speaking up for yourself, not asking for what you need, not setting and enforcing boundaries, letting people take advantage of you. And the reason why we self-abandon is because it begins in childhood. It's likely that either our parents or other influential adults didn't meet our emotional and our physical needs in child. They abandoned us emotionally or physically, and it caused a feeling of unworthiness and a feeling of being unlovable. And that would be natural. But as adults, we tend to repeat these types of patterns from childhood because they're familiar, and we repeatedly choose partners and friends who mistreat, take advantage of, or don't support us. And we do the same to ourselves. We don't know how to be there for ourselves because no one was truly there for us. So self-abandonment is a learned behavior, a way you try to cope with unhealthy or dysfunctional family dynamics. Children depend on adults to meet their emotional and physical needs. But when you live in an unpredictable, chaotic, or possibly abusive family, you learn to hide your true self. And you act like a chameleon, morphing into whatever role will keep the peace and help you avoid ridicule, put-downs, physical and emotional pain. You learn to suppress those feelings and needs that your worth depends on, what you accomplish or do. And whatever you do, it's never enough, is it? That your needs, interests, and goals don't matter, and that you don't deserve love and compassion. Self-abandonment is a destructive pattern, and that's why this world card came up in reverse. And it contributes to anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and unfulfilling relationships. So maybe abandoning yourself may have been a necessity during childhood, but it isn't helpful anymore. So it's time to start learning how to trust and value yourself. Isn't that beautiful? So allow yourself to be creative, quirky, and uniquely you. Allow yourself to have feelings and needs. Treat yourself with compassion. And the basic tenets of self-compassion are: notice when you're struggling. Notice your feelings and your body sensations. So muscle tension, aches and pains, rapid heart rate, and so on. And it'll help you notice when you're experiencing a disappointment, loss, or hard time. And then 2, recognize that everyone suffers, has difficulties, and makes mistakes. When you do this, you feel connected to others through your struggles rather than isolated and inadequate because of them. And then 3, mindful awareness of your negative feelings. The goal is to be aware of your feelings, but not judge them. You want to give them space, but not let them define you. And then you can think about what concrete actions you can take to comfort yourself. Okay? So I don't know if this has helped anyone. I hope it has. I'm sending you so much love, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Bye, Pisces.